Welcome to the Coming Home Well podcast, the show that educates, supports, and advocates for the veteran community. Your host, Dr. Tyler Piron, U.S. Army retired, will bring you exciting conversations with amazing guests about resources, research, and military history, all geared to helping our warriors to come home well. Here's your host, Dr. Tyler Piron.
Welcome back to Coming Home Well. I'm your host, Tyler Piron, and today we're going to have an interesting story about heroism, tragedy, and something that I don't know a lot about, the U.S. Navy. And really, it's about a ship and the people that served on this ship in the Navy. It was way back in Vietnam, so if you're a Vietnam veteran, this story is probably for you. But if you're interested in naval history, it's also for you. The Navy, like every military service, has a lot of dangers, even when you're not getting shot at. The most dangerous part of military service is when you're getting shot, or artillery, or something like that, or I guess in the Navy, submarines and torpedoes. That isn't the case. It's a dangerous job, no matter where you are or what you're doing. So we have Steve Kraus, and he is involved with an organization called the USS Frank E Evans, which is a destroyer with DD 754. And it's quite an amazing story. This ship had done a number of things, and I don't want to steal Steve's thunder. So, Steve, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Okay, thank you, Tyler, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So tell me, what is the USS Frank E Evans?
Okay, the Evans was a World War II. We call them tin cans or destroyers. It was commissioned in 1945, put into service, and at the very tail end of World War II. It served there, then was, of course, brought home. It was decommissioned for a couple of years until the Korean incident occurred and was put back into service. So it served in Korea, and then it was kept in commission. And it served up till 1969 when it was in what I call a fatal collision between a Australian aircraft carrier. Now, destroyers initially were created for multiple purposes. One, for their agility to be around aircraft carriers, to protect them, to screen them, to provide immediate gunfire support when needed. And later in the ship's career, it became an anti-submarine warfare device in tracking submarines, and also trying to put out discharge ammunitions to sink a sub, or in the later years what was called an ASROC, which was a rocket that could also take a submarine out of commission. So it was multiple purpose. It was a little over 376 feet long. And one of the things that I've heard from other military people is, well, we had a home. Our home was our base, or our home was our tent, or what. But look at it as Evans was our home. We lived on it, we ate on it, we slept on it. Mm-hmm. We fought on it. And so you have a unique brotherhood that is created with shipmates that serve. So our story is one that's unique. We tell people that, did you know that there was a ship that did not come back from the Vietnam War because it was lost? And probably 99 out of 100 people will go, no, I've never heard the story.
No, I never did. I mean, it's so fascinating to me because, I'm an Army guy and I belong to a number of units. And so there's some camaraderie and esprit de corps in those units. And you can recognize the patches and people and things like that. But I can't imagine the same physical spaces. Everyone that served on the ship would have known exactly where you're talking about when you're talking about the berthing areas or the dining areas or the engine compartments, and all those things, because we're talking about a ship that's basically a football field long, and you're on it like for years.
Right. And the ship was built to accommodate about 345 people. And during my time on the ship, we never saw more than maybe 280 at one time. And I think that was quite common in most of the ships. They were undermanned. It was a time period when they were initiated the draft, and a majority of the draft was going to the Army that was, serving on land. So when we did deploy for that last deployment, we were significantly undermanned. We were actually sitting at 256 people. And so that requires a lot of people to do extra duty, extra time, and things like that. And it was quite common during that time for people to be coming on and not really going off. They were trying to get people to stay in longer. But in this particular case, we left Long Beach in March of 1969 and went to Hawaii. That was the very first stop. And as a little side note, actually got to see part of the filming of the movie Tora Tora Tora. They were actually filming that during that time. And then from there, went on, refueled in Guam, went on to Japan, Philippines, and then went to what we call our first duty station, which was gunfire support right off the coast of Vietnam. So if I can kind of fill in the story, that first deployment and first assignment was with Operation Daring Rebel. And for those,
and that's the one into Vietnam.
Yeah, that's on the south. It's in the south end, right off of Da Nang. And at that particular time, there was a huge Marine landing that was taking place. And it was over about a 14-day period where they were landing and pushing inland. And so we were there with amphibious ships. There were some other destroyers, and we were there specifically to provide gunfire support.
So let me pause you for a moment, because I'm trying to picture this. Destroyers aren't like the super big guns, the 16-inch, massive battleships.
Right.
What kind of armaments does a destroyer have at that time?
We had 3 turrets. They were called 5-inch 38 guns. They were 5-inch diameter shells.
That's a big shell, yeah.
It's a pretty fair size shell. It can do its damage. It can shoot in about, 10 to 12 miles.
Okay, that's a lot further than I was thinking.
Yeah, we would usually anchor in a lot of cases as far out as 2 miles, but as close in as maybe 500 feet, just depending on the depth. And you would, at that particular time, we would usually have an Army spotter that would come on board, and he would be there, and he would, get his calls from the beach, so to speak, and then get our designates, and then we would do our shooting.
Okay, so you're like mobile artillery, basically.
Right. We can move up and down the beach, obviously restricted to depth. And so in that particular case, we were there for 14 days. We fired over 3,500 rounds.
That's a lot of shots.
It's a lot of shots. Now, a lot of the shots in the evening were what we called, starlight. It was to provide lighting.
The illumination shells that slowly come down.
Right.
And then burn real brightly. Yeah, I can picture that.
So that's what we did. We had a couple other destroyers. We would, kind of tag team, relieve each other. We'd go rearm, refuel, come back. But we'd only be gone, as long as it took to do that. So that was our our assignment, and we did well on that.
And that was your first taste of combat since the Korean War.
Well,
And
that
that
was
ship. Well,
that
that
was
ship.
actually the second
Okay.
tour for Frank E Evans. It had gone in '67,
Gotcha. So
and
very
I
early in
wasn't
the
on
Vietnam
there
War.
on that one. So that was its second. What we called, tour. We call it Westpac is what we called it. It was Western
How long
Pacific.
are these Westpacs? It's hard for me to imagine because I'm an Army guy. They usually send us for a year at a time
Yeah.
in one place, but you're on a ship and you're moving and you're going places. So how long would that tour be?
It would be probably 6 to 8 months.
Okay.
And then you would be back, and then you would probably do, whatever upkeep you needed to do for the ship and all of that. And then you would go again, and probably, you'd maybe have up to a year back in the States and then back.
Gotcha.
Now,
6 months, boom, boom. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I didn't join the Navy.
yeah,
I was picturing it and I said, oh, I don't know about all that.
yeah.
So let me back up just for a moment. How did you get in the Navy? What is that story? Because Vietnam was warming up, the draft was starting. You're not a really old guy, so you must have been a pretty young guy at the time.
Right. I was living in a city, Pomona, California. It's just outside of LA, and I was going to college. I was in junior college, and I was school break during Christmas, and I remember this as if it was yesterday. I happened to go to the mailbox. Don't ever do that, but I happened to do it. Our mail came early in the morning, and I opened up the mail, and there was a letter there from me from Lyndon Johnson inviting me to join the Army on the 4th of January. And
they don't give you much time.
No,
So
they
this was a
didn't.
draft notice?
Yes, it was my draft notice.
Oh, goodness. I thought you
And
were exempt if you were in college.
There wasn't. The exemptions had all been lifted at that time.
Ah, gotcha.
Okay. So I somewhat panicked and said, there is no way I want to be in the Army or the Marines. I'm a chicken. So I had a brother-in-law who'd been in the Navy and had told me all the exciting adventures that he did. And so I actually went down to the Navy recruiting office. It was down in the main part of town. Everybody kind of knew where it was. And I caught a guy. I didn't know who he was. And I know now he was a chief, but then to me he was just a Navy guy. And he literally was locking his door to go on leave
for the Christmas break. Yeah,
Christmas break. So, I told him, hey, I'd always wanted to be in the Navy, but I got this letter. And I think he saw kind of the panic in my eye, and he said,
I got a live one.
Yeah. He goes, hey, here's one I can sign up. I don't have to do anything. But he said, look, if you promise to be here on January the 4th, because that was the day he was coming back. And he said, I will put a card in that says you've already joined. And I said, it's a deal. So he opened his door back up and went in, signed this card. He filled this thing out. He went right outside because the post office thing was in the same building, and mailed it. So I showed up on the 4th of January. It's 1966. Figuring, okay, I'm going in, and he says, hey, I got a better deal for you. I can delay your entry for 90 days.
Well, that's even better.
That's even better. I can even finish my school semester, because we were on semester program and it didn't finish till the end of January. So I did that, and I went in and officially joined the Navy on the 4th of May of 1966.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. I mean, not awesome you got drafted, but awesome you were able to make a choice.
Right.
And, if I was at that time, I'm not sure that I would want to join the Army either. Of course, I always look back at it and retrospectively go, I wouldn't change anything, but if I could do it all over again, I'd join the Air Force.
Yeah.
That's a joke, but yeah, there's a little bit of truth in that. And I suppose during Vietnam, especially with all the fighting on the ground, and we've all seen the movies,
Yeah.
and you're hearing about it, and you're seeing it in the newspaper, and I suppose the newsreels and sort of the limited TV Walter Cronkite times, you said, I'm not interested in that. And
Right.
no one else was either. But at least
Right.
you did your duty and joined.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was, that was the beginning. I had no idea what I wanted to do in the Navy. I mean, I had absolutely, I was willing to just, I guess, do whatever they said. When I went to boot camp, they did what they did to everybody. They test you and all of that. And as I said earlier, though, the ships were significantly undermanned, and they were doing everything in their power to get people on the ships. And so I got assigned to a destroyer. It was the Henry W. Tucker. It was almost identical type to the Frank E. Evans, and that was my first tour. And on that ship, I kind of figured, well, the way this seems to work is the higher rank you get, the less you do.
You picked up on that pretty quickly, didn't you?
Sign me up for that. And I think it's that way in all the military.
Yes, it is.
It is. So, and I'm down on the main deck chipping paint and doing all this, and I was kind of paying attention to the people that seemed to be going on liberty the most. And somehow it caught my eye. The signalmen, the radiomen, the radarmen, the quartermasters, they all seemed to be like the guys that were leaving early and going. But little did I know how much they stand watch when they went to sea. But I asked one of them, and they said, "Why don't you come on up here, be a signalman?" And that's, to make a real long story, short, that's what I did. And
so you find yourself on the Frank Evans. You're out there. You just touched on Vietnam. You're shooting for 2 weeks. Right. Going to repair, refit, all those things, supporting the Marines going on shore just south of Da Nang.
Yeah.
What was that like for you? I mean, obviously, I'm more of an Army guy, so I understand, that sort of, hey, how you deploy and how you get on land and all these things. But all of a sudden, you're shooting shots in anger,
right?
And you don't have enough people. You don't have the full complement of the crew,
right?
That means you're probably working really long hours, even though you're on a ship. You're not like, trudging through the woods,
right?
Or the jungles, I suppose. But it's a lot of work. It's a lot of things that are happening. What does that look like? What does that feel like?
Well, in my particular case, we were so shorthanded that we stood what we called them port and starboard watches. You were either on watch or you were off watch. And when you were off watch, you were probably sleeping, and then you'd get woken up. And in our watch standard, we would say, let's take a new day and say the new day starts at midnight, and you would be on watch from midnight to about 7 a.m. Then you would sleep all day, and then you would come on watch about dinner time around 5 and be on watch till midnight. And then it would cycle around and around, and that's what you did.
And what are you watching for? I mean, so I'm not a Navy guy, but I can sort of picture it. You've always seen the movies.
Yeah.
Even the pirate movies, ships ahead and things like that. But what are you looking for?
Well, when we were, as signalmen, we were one of the communication sources, obviously between ships. And as people today have a hard time figuring that because you just pick up their cell phone. But in this particular case, you could either radio or you could send things visually by light, by semaphore, by flag. And that's how we operated. So during daylight, when you're with several ships and the lead ship would command you to make course changes and speed changes by flag, And that's what we did. So you would constantly watch the command ship, and you would watch the other ships for any kind of communications, and you would, read it, and you'd have somebody on watch who would write it, and then you would route it, and that cycle went around and around and around and around. And
Okay, so that's a
that's what we
different
did.
discussion for me, because I think watch, like when in the military, army, if you're on watch duty, you're watching for something like a sentry. But in
Right.
this case, you're really talking about a duty day.
That's right.
When you're working, doing your job.
Right.
Okay, that
And
makes perfect sense.
everyone on the ship has their watch. And if you're at general quarters, they have their general quarters station. And if you have a fire, they have their fire stations, and any of those kinds of things. So it just depends. And that's what they train you for. And obviously, same as any military, you train. And then when you're done training, you train again. And
Yeah, you train a lot more than you actually do the thing. That's
absolutely,
true.
you do. And I think it's, to me, I've been in, of course, the workforce, and that seems to be the opposite. They don't train; they put you on your job, and you have a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing, and that's what happened. But in the military, it's quite the reverse. I
Mhm.
mean, you train till you become an expert in what you do. And
So let's go back to 1969. You just finished the 14 days off the coast of Vietnam. It was the second tour for the Frank Evans, but your first tour on the Frank Evans,
yes,
where you're out there in the West Pac, been shooting guns, 3,500 rounds of the 5-inch shells, supporting the Marines. And then what does the ship do? Do they continue? Do they go up and down the coast? How
well,
does that work?
we got orders to go back to Subic Bay, rearm
Which is in the Philippines.
in the Philippines. It's about 800 miles away, maybe 1,000 miles away. Get a little liberty, a couple of days, and then we were ordered to report to Manila for a CEDO operation, which in this particular case, the United States belonged to, the Southern, organization. It is no longer today, but we were, we were pledged with other countries to defend, against communism, of course, in
Mhm.
Asia. So that CEDO organization was comprised of New Zealand, Australia, Japan, the Philippines, England, Vietnam, call it South Vietnam, and of course, the United States, Taiwan. We're all part of this organization. And this training exercise was to bring all of these people together to learn to work together.
And that's a continuous challenge, even with NATO and all the other organizations today. Is
They-
how do you talk? How do you maneuver? How do you do all the things that you might do really well as an independent country, but when you've got all these different mechanisms and different flags, different signals, different radio
yeah,
channels, it gets hard.
yeah, it does. You try to simplify everything, and we had our drills in Manila Bay with signaling by semaphore, by lights, by flags, and all of that,
Hmm.
just to be familiar, with how they worked. And our our head of our task force was the Australian aircraft carrier Melbourne. Now, this was a little bit unique in that normally any others that I'd ever been involved with other countries, the United States was always the lead,
Hmm.
primarily. This particular case, the command was turned over to the Australians, and so we headed out with them, and it was pretty routine for the first few days. A little, some anti-submarine, some maneuvers, some this and that, some refuels at sea, those types of things, seeing how we work together. Um, Out on the ocean, unless you pay attention, most of the people don't even know, where you are. You just know it's water.
Yeah, because it's like you don't have a lot of points of reference.
Yeah. We know where we were. Everybody probably knows, okay, we're going to be doing this exercise for 10 days. When the exercise is over, we're going to be at Satahip. We're going to go to Satahip and Thailand. So that's all we know. And you probably don't see shore until you're coming in, and by that time it's done. So we're out, we're on watch, just like I told you earlier, as a signalman, port starboard. Communications is limited, not as heavy as normally with American ships together, stuff like that. But there's still gives you some ability to talk to other ships, especially since the New Zealand's and the Australians and course, the England and us was English, and
Everyone
so that
speaks the same language, so that helps.
they were pretty much, kind of pretty much easy. Who are you? Where are you from? Back and those types of things.
Right.
And command type stuff was really limited. It was done mostly through radio.
Mm-hmm.
And
so this is back in the day before there's GPS and all the things we have now to know exactly where we are and how fast we're going. So communication is limited, and you really have to know where you are, what direction you're going, what speed. Probably
Right.
have a sextant or two to figure out where you are in the world,
right,
those type things.
yeah,
So you're out there with the Australians in an aircraft carrier. Aircraft carriers are massive ships. I've been on a couple.
yeah,
They're just amazingly huge.
right,
Now, I don't know about this Australian ship, but everyone I've ever seen is just incredibly massive. 5,000 people on some of the modern day ones.
yeah.
And you're out there in the South China Sea. What's happening? What's going on?
Well, we did exercises where we plane guard for them. They aircraft were taking off, aircraft were landing. We knew we were doing anti-submarine, where you're chasing a submarine, or
Mm-hmm.
you're doing this or that, and pretty routine kind of stuff for an exercise like that. Of course, other parts of the ship, they're doing their types of things, and what they did is we were split into two task groups within that task force, and the aircraft carrier Kearsarge was the other task group, and the Melbourne took the other task group, and one kind of like became the enemy and one became the good guys, and I think
Force
the
on
Army,
force, pretend,
yeah,
exercise.
okay. So we were doing that. Now on now I'll kind of fast forward. We were doing those things, and so I'll fast forward to it's 23:45 on the 2nd of June,
So
and
almost midnight for you guys that
almost
don't know military time.
right, and I'm getting ready to come on watch with I called him my striker. He was a seaman. I was a second class petty officer, and we came on board for that night watch, and it should have been from noon to about 7,
Mm-hmm.
like I explained previously. I stopped off in the pilot house, which is the bridge, which is a section that's up about 2 decks. It's where you steer the ship, where the speed. It's where the officer of the deck, who's in charge of running the ship and all of that, that's where they all reside. The lookouts,
It's probably the best view on the ship, pretty
it's
much.
it's the operation part of the ship. They're in charge. It's a darkened ship exercise for the night. That means there are no lights, no running lights. It's completely dark, and you don't light a cigarette, you don't do anything like that illuminates any kind of lighting. Now, for a signalman, hey, guess what? That's kind of like a signal. I called it the signalman's holiday because you
You're
still have
not
to be
looking
able,
for the flashing lights and all that because they're not doing that.
they're not going to be any.
And you're not going to look
And
for the flags, the semaphores, because you can't see them at night. So you
right.
just have to listen for the radio.
You just, well, we don't have anything to do with the radio. We just have to listen to our communication if somebody's going to try to get a hold of us. And we had to be on watch,
Gotcha.
and in that kind of an environment, we're semi-responsible to know where all the ships are and how the positions are, and keep an eye in case anything does happen that we're watching out for it. So I was what's called the signalman of the watch, the guy in charge of that part, and so I let my striker. I said, "Look, why don't you grab some more sleep? There's no need. Just lay down here on the top of the signal shack. And the signal shack's on the third deck above the water, and it's as high as you can go on the ship without going up the mast." And I said, "Hey, about 3 o'clock, we'll switch positions, and let's do that." Of course, he was delighted, and he did that. So for
I
me,
can totally picture this, Steve. I can totally picture like, hey, we have to be here. Not much is going to happen. Why don't you take a nap? Then I'll take a nap. It's like
yeah,
any staff duty officer of the day type thing I've ever done.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So that starts, and time can't go any slower when you have nothing to do. I mean, it's but time is going by, and I'm periodically looking, and our ship is a screen for the Melbourne, along with 4 other destroyers. Okay, and the setup was specifically, when I came on watch, we had a position that was behind the ship, but shortly after, maybe in an hour, they changed formation, and we were directly out in front of the ship. And when we made that change, our ship was directly in front, and all of the destroyers were zigzagging. And for any listeners, that a zigzag course is so that all of the destroyers change course rapidly, off and on, all along, where the carrier stays on a fixed course, and it's hard for the submarine to figure out what is the course.
Ah,
Yeah,
gotcha.
okay.
So
So
that's
it's
the idea. I was wondering why they would be zigzagging all over the place,
yeah,
just
and
for no reason. But it was really so if the submarine's under the water, they're trying to listen who's
yeah,
going where. All
yeah,
this extra noise and changes throws
yeah,
them off.
yeah. So we're on the zigzag course, and we're moving, and we're making slight course changes. We're making a 10. As we zigzag, you're only making a couple of degrees, but if they did change a course, it would be maybe 10, 15 degrees, slight change, and everybody stayed in their own positions, and we called it their own sectors. It's kind of like you stay in your backyard and I'll stay in mine. So we did that, and that went on, and the next thing I remember, it's about 2:30, and I hear somebody on the lower decks, and I went over to the railing and I asked what was going on, and it was one of the guys from sonar, and I said, "Well, we're getting ready to wrap up the sonar exercise, so we decided we're going to switch watches when we do that, because we're going to be done." And so I figured, okay, after that's done, I didn't know what we were going to do next. Now, the next thing that I distinctly remember happening is that we are making, this is more than just a few degree change. We're making, obviously, a course change.
Yeah, you could feel it because you're on a
Yeah,
ship that isn't too big and it's
yeah,
zigzagging.
yeah. When you start to make a big, degree turn, you can tell. And I decided I'm going to go around and spot where the carrier is and where we are in relationship to the other ships. And that's the series of events that leads up to the real crux of our story. And it's I looked where I thought the carrier was, and I didn't see them. And so I went around to the other side of our area and did the same thing. I looked for them. I didn't see them. So I decided to come to the front over the bridge and take a look. And when I did, I saw the carrier coming straight at us. And I mean, we were close. Now, before that, we were probably about 4,000 yards away from the ship most of the night. And in the dark and at the night, that's quite a distance.
That's a safe distance. I mean, that's about 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles.
Right.
That's a good distance.
Yeah. So I saw them coming at us, and I knew that there's something wrong. They're going to hit us. And I ran back into our little signal shack that we have on there. And I hit our communication button to the bridge. And I said, we're going to get hit. And right about that time, we got hit. Now,
got hit by who?
By the carrier, by Melbourne.
So this massive aircraft carrier is running into your ship.
Right. Now here's what happened in the last number of yards. We were turning right full rudder.
Mm-hmm.
And they came
going to the right or going to the left?
Going to the right. Starboard. Okay. And they, at the last minute, went left full rudder. Now, when
trying to avoid you?
Yeah. They figured, they didn't know that we were going right full, and they went left full, even though they had communicated both my rudder's hard right. And in doing that, in the last, let's call it the last 100 yards or so, we squared up. They actually T-boned us.
Oh,
right
wow.
in the middle. Okay. Both ships were doing 21 knots. That's for two big ships coming together. That's a lot of speed.
Mm-hmm.
They hit us, what I'm going to call a midships. It's almost right in the middle of our ship. And they went over it. And I think, my wife best describes this to everybody. It's like a semi-truck trailer running over a Volkswagen.
It's a much larger ship. Yeah. It's a huge, aircraft carriers are by definition very, very big. Yeah. And destroyers are designed to be like sports cars and zig and zag and go and be very agile. Right. So you've got those two ships. I can just picture it. You're cutting across, and that aircraft carrier, oh my gosh, it probably just blew you in half.
It did. It actually split the ship into two pieces. And for non-Navy people that are not familiar, ships are built into two operating pieces, the forward and the back, so that if something happens operational wise, there's a forward engine room and after engine room, forward fire room, after fire room. Mm-hmm. But this happened to break right at that expansion joint, and the back half had a partitioning wall that actually goes from the main deck all the way down to the keel, the ship.
Right.
So the ship breaks into two pieces. I'm on the forward section. That's the section. It basically, the impact rolls us over completely on our side. And then, the water is right at the signal bridge. We're laying on our side. My instinct said, don't stay with the ship, get away from this. Mm-hmm. And I did. I actually, swam away from the ship. I kicked the little door that we had in our signal shack open, swam away from the ship. So I swam so far away that literally I had to be picked up, I had to swim back in.
Now, the guy that was with you that was taking the nap.
Okay, he was, like I said, the impact catapulted him up onto the flight deck of the aircraft carrier. So
Wow.
he lands on the aircraft carrier deck.
That's amazing. Like, what is
That's
that, like 20 feet, 30 feet?
Well, I've recalculated this a bunch of times, and when you lay them next to us, their flight deck must have been just a few feet up above our signal shack height.
Oh, yeah, because you
Remember,
were at the very height of the top of your
we're the
ship.
three decks up.
And
So,
was he okay? Did he make it?
well, he was the most injured of all the surviving injuries. He was. It took him almost a year to recover. He was flighted off of their ship over to Cameron Bay. He spent a few weeks in Cameron Bay. They sent him to Japan. He stayed, I think, 3 months in Japan. Then they sent him to Oakland. He spent the rest of the year, and then they let him out of the Navy. He had told me they literally broke almost every bone in his body.
Wow, what an impact. I mean, that sort of brings home the impact and the pressures involved. So if he was injured, it sounds like, T-bones are always the most dangerous.
Yeah.
What happened to the crew?
Okay. On the forward part of the ship is where all the fatalities were. There were 74. Okay.
So wow, 74 U.S. sailors died as a result of this.
That's right.
Wow.
And the ones that survived from the forward section, I can almost name them, but it takes too long. There was, of course, the officer of the deck, the junior officer of the deck made it off. One of the lee helmsmen and one of the helmsmen made it off. One lookout made it. The rest went down. Everyone that was in the radio room, sonar room, and the radar room were all lost. And all of those that were sleeping in the forward sections, with the exception of several of the chiefs who slept forward, that were able to get out, and 7 got out from a sleeping quarter that was one deck below the main deck.
Mm-hmm.
Got out before the water took them down. So
that front section sort of like sheared in half and then went down really quickly.
3 minutes.
Wow.
3 minutes, it was gone.
So the back half of the ship is still sort of floating?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. What it did is, if you looked at it, it snapped it in half, and the back half actually kind of hug itself next to the carrier. Mm-hmm. And the after stack on our ship, that's our call it smokestack or exhaust stack, it kind of lodged itself in their hangar deck, which was down, and that hangar deck kept it there, so it kept it right with it until they came to a stop.
Oh wow. So it sort of kept it lodged and sort of kept it from sinking.
Right. So of course, once everything stopped, the Australians, of course, put their helicopters in the air. They put their motor whaleboats in the water, and they started picking up survivors that were in the water. I was one of those.
You must be a pretty strong swimmer to get so far away. You had to swim back.
Yeah, I was a good swimmer then. I was luckily a good swimmer. Yeah, I had gotten so far out. I actually, swam away. I never remember, surprisingly, seeing the carrier, but I did see the forward section. It went. It's just kind of like you see in the movie Titanic. It filled up from the inside, and the bow went up, and it went down. and I did see that. But once it was gone, you know, I'm there kind of by myself. You know, I'm thinking, what, you know, didn't see the carrier, because they actually were way down and to my, I guess, my right. If I'm floating on my back, they're, you know, they're a mile away. By the time they stop. So I never really see them. It's of course pitch black,
Yeah,
but
it's
pretty
like
soon I
stopping a
can.
train. I mean, even if you apply the brakes, it's going to take a while
Oh
to
yeah,
slow down
yeah,
and to stop.
yeah. They
So you're like a mile away.
yeah,
Your ship is like cut in half. Part of it just up and boom and sank right quickly.
yeah,
74 went down with the ship.
right,
They pluck you out of the ocean,
yeah.
and then what happens?
Well, they take us, you know, on the Melbourne. We stay on the Melbourne. I did get some first aid. I had hurt my thumb and in my back, but uh, we got cared for there. And of course, they started taking uh, us to people that had been on watch were to go and start writing down, what did you see, what did you hear, you know, the
Mm-hmm.
whole thing. They do that right away. We did that. Remember, this was 3:10 in the morning. Um, Everyone always asks me exactly how long were you in the water, and I have to say I do not know, but I
Yeah, it's not
think
like you're checking your watch or starting a
yeah, I did.
stopwatch.
Yeah, I think it was about 40 minutes before I was picked up.
That's pretty quick, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's pretty quick. They had within an hour they had picked everybody up. So uh, uh, we did that. Uh, Last, you know, we then are all mustered, and then they take us over by a motor whaleboat over to the Kearsarge. By that time, every ship in the task group had come together, and they were doing searches and stuff like that.
Just trying to figure out, make sure everybody got picked up, that there was nothing left, that we
Right.
weren't leaving someone floating there,
Yeah.
waving, kind of like the Tom Hanks character, you know,
Yeah.
with a volleyball. You don't want that
Right.
happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, that occurs. We go on to the Kearsarge. To be real honest, Tyler, I have little memory of being on there. I do remember that night we did have a memorial ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm
in
sure
fact,
you were in shock as well.
I must have been, but I remember that I was standing in the back row when we were having the memorial
Mm-hmm.
ceremony. I remember that. And, but I couldn't tell you where I slept, where I ate, or what I did on there.
Yeah, you're in shock, just got pulled up from the water.
Yeah.
The ship you've been on for the last long
Yeah.
period of time all of a sudden is like destroyed, blown
Yeah.
in half.
Right.
And you probably lost friends.
Yeah. So we go back. Of course, the exercise is over. The Kearsarge takes us back to Subic Bay. I stayed there with several others for the court of inquiry that took place until actually all the rest of June. And I got back home, I think it was on the 3rd of July for my leave. And then I went to my next assignment, got out of the Navy, and kind of forgot about it for 25 years until all of a sudden someone saying, you know, the Frank E Evans group's getting together, and so we went to my wife and I went to a reunion in 1994. So between then 94, I have no communications with anybody, and that's probably about the same story you'll get from everyone. They kind of just,
How did you
okay,
even hear about it? I mean, this is like pre-internet times. You know,
yeah,
it's not like you know, like there's Facebook groups back then or something.
yeah, yeah. So it wasn't until we come together and we start, grouping up again in our association, and our association was actually founded by a couple of guys that were on the ship in 1952 to 54. They were
Oh
the ones
wow!
that,
So like the
that
Korean War type.
yeah, they said, hey, we ought to get together and start getting in. And they actually, old school started calling friends who called a friend who called a friend.
Hmm.
And I don't have any clue how anybody got my name, but just one day out of the blue, I get a call and says, hey, and I said, I had no idea. I hadn't talked to anybody. And so, you know, start getting involved. I'm still working at the time. Most people are still working. Our group, the survivor group, which is, of course, the last crew of the ship.
Hmm.
And it's not till then that the whole crux of this whole situation comes to fruition when we learn that the 74 shipmates are not on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall.
Now, you guys were in Vietnam just immediately prior to this, shooting guns and supporting the Marines. So, and this was the second or third time that the ship, the Frank E Evans, had been to Vietnam serving.
Yeah.
Why in the world are they not on the Vietnam Wall?
Okay. The first excuses that came out. Now this is early on. This is relatives. Now you have to visualize this because
Hmm.
this is kind of heartbreaking that uh, they went to the Vietnam Wall thinking that, quote, their son or their brother was on that wall and looking for his name like everybody to inscribe their name. And of course they can't find it. This is in the 80s.
Hmm.
And so when they can't find it, of course, they ask national parks and they say, well, they're not on the list. And so they reach out through their congressman and they start getting, excuses like, we don't know, we'll have to find out. But geez, they weren't lists. The Navy didn't submit them, and so it's really not until 2003 when our association then gets involved as an association to start asking questions as to really why aren't they on the wall. And the initial question was, well, they died outside what we call the defined combat zone.
Right. Like the areas immediately surrounding Vietnam or,
Right.
where they were launching planes that were going into Vietnam, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's actually, if you visualize it, it's about 100 miles of water that surrounds it. It goes around. It takes in all of Vietnam. Okay, and so that line in the water is there. The point where the collision occurred was actually another 112 miles outside that line.
Gotcha.
And if you look at a map, you can see that we were itching our way toward Satahip,
Hmm.
So we were heading that way. So that's the initial answers that start, and we start getting our Congress people involved and asking more and more questions, and the answers are always sketchy. They're vague. If you can get an answer, and at this particular time, the Department of Defense, the Secretary of Defense, and all of that had been there forever, and they start changing now between 2003 and now we start to get where we do get some congressional and senatorial support. Out here in California, we get Congressman Adam Schiff to become our liaison, our supporter.
Hmm.
And in the Senate, we get a name everybody knows, Chuck Schumer. And Chuck Schumer gets involved because he has, 4 that died from New York. And of course, California, we had 23 that died from California. And so as research goes, we start finding out, well, wait a second, there are names on the wall that people that died outside the combat zone.
That was exactly my question. Like, are there other people on the Vietnam Wall that were not in the defined area that are on the Vietnam Wall that died incidentally or, separate from armed conflict, but were supporting the war directly or indirectly?
And the answer is yes, and undeniably, yes. Even one of the founders, of course, if you do research, Jan Scruggs is one of the originals with his idea, and it was a great idea, but it was kind of, let's do a memorial, and then after it got in the hands of the government, it becomes ill-conceived and not well thought of, not thought out, uh, and even Robert Dubeck, he's the author of a book that says, creating the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. He himself admits that, hey, at the end, I was under a timeline. We had all of these lists that were coming in. It was hard to reconcile them. I just added names. I added names from Cambodia, from Laos, from this and that, and so
they didn't do quite the vetting that they had anticipated they would do.
Right. It was, like I said, it wasn't. Now it's starting to become an issue. Is we're going to run out of room, or these guys, we can't put these names because by design they were put in the date where they died, and what seems relatively simple becomes complex. And had in 2003 they put the 74 names on there, we'd be all marching down the road merrily and happy. But we're not now, because
they didn't.
What?
Because they did not add the 74 names.
Yeah, they didn't. They should have then. They should now. And yeah, they didn't. They overlooked other groups. There's other people, but hey, they need to get in line and get their names on there too before there isn't space. And this year, Senator Schumer has asked the GAO, the General Accountability Office, he says, hey, on the Hill, we hear all of these stories. Well, why does this group keep pushing this? There's no room left on the wall. So he's asking them, tell me, is there room left on the wall? Tell me, is it cost prohibitive? Tell me, is there other names on the wall that people that died outside the defined combat? Let's clarify this so we can move on to this, because we don't want this to be an issue where a few people stop something when 99.9% of the world wants them on the wall.
Sure. So the Lost 74 from the Frank E Evans, after this tragedy in 1969, then you guys start meeting together in the 90s, the association, they get your name, you get involved, and it's been many years. And so all sorts of things have permutated over these last several decades.
Yeah.
Really almost, 55 years since the accident.
Yep. Right.
So these all things happen. The names are not on the Vietnam Wall. How can folks help you get the names, the Lost 74 from the USS Frank E Evans onto the Vietnam Wall?
Well, it's pretty simple. If your congressman makes it real easy for you to communicate. If you're their constituent, you simply go online and you check in with them and you tell them, hey, I support getting 74 names of the Frank E Evans soldier on the wall. It's as simple as that. If they could do that, that's a big help. We are working, with groups that we think are the decision makers in this, which is the Armed Forces, the Armed Services Committee, and all of that.
So does a law need to be passed, or is it a regulatory thing? What is the process?
I think the process is simply for the Department of Defense to say, hey, yeah, we didn't follow our own criteria. Had we never put a name of anyone who died outside that zone on the wall, then we would stand firm and say no. But the thing is they don't follow their own criteria. And when you don't do that, you open up Pandora's box.
Absolutely.
And now they're worried, well, if we put 74 names on it, then there's these other groups that are going to want theirs on. And yep, the box has been open. You just got to admit it and fix it. it's a thing that you have to finally say, okay, let's address this. We're in it. We just never fix anything. We patch it.
That's absolutely true. So we have all these names, these lost 74. And so the real concern is this Pandora's box of, well, there was all these other deaths that were somewhat related, that were not in that defined combat zone. And we're afraid that we'll run out of room and that there won't be enough space, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's, it'll go. And as a survivor, and I know I speak for my survivors, and I speak for our association members too, as president of the organization, we're just not quitting. Don't think that you're going to continue to just say, well, hopefully they'll go away, because we're just not going to go away.
No, that's absolutely awesome. You have to advocate. Those are the things that get done, are the things where people are advocating and pushing it and saying, hey, this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
So how can folks, other than reaching out to their congressman, is there anything else that they could do? Do you have a website? Do you have an organizational page, Facebook or something that they can go out and find out more?
We do. Our website address is very simple. I always tell people www, but I'm told, Steve, you don't even need to do that anymore.
Yeah, some places still need it.
Yeah, but it's www.USS, which stands for United States Ship, and we made it FEE for Frank E Evans.org.
That's super easy. And folks, you don't have to write it down. If you're listening in your car, we're going to link to the website on the Facebook page and all the other places that you're going to pull up the podcast or on the YouTube channel. So don't worry about writing it down. We'll make sure we have a link in there for you.
Right. And the story's there. The pictures are there. My 74 shipmates pictures are there. It's all there. And, we just keep moving forward. And, Tyler, shows like yours that afford us the opportunity to tell our story. We're certainly appreciative of that. We get together as a group every year, which is very unique for a ship our size, to still be having reunions where we get in excess of 100 people show up.
So, oh, wow. That's a lot. I mean, because you only had 250 at a time. So we'll have a massive amount.
Yeah, we're meeting this year in Spokane, Washington. And actually our reunion starts on September 11th, 9/11. But, we all remember those people that lost their lives in 9/11. And we continue. We put memorials in every one of the states for our lost.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got 7 locations that have all 74 names. And if we have time, I'll tell you that the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans state is dedicating their memorial on June 6th.
Oh, that's coming up.
Yes. And they are putting a panel of the lost 74 in their state memorial. Now,
wonderful.
From Nebraska, there was 4 shipmates lost. Now, 3 of them were brothers, the Sage brothers.
Wow.
All 3 brothers. There was 4 brothers in the family. 3 of them died that day.
That is crazy. What are the odds?
Yeah. The odds.
And I guess I remember the famous story about the Sullivan brothers. You may be aware of that as well.
Yeah.
And that's one of those, like, oh my gosh, then that changed some of the Department of Defense policies because they don't want another event like that.
Right. Yeah. A lot of people thought, they forbid you from doing that, but the policy change is that the parents would have to agree that they would serve, and that's what they did. And
so, Steve, I've asked you a lot of questions. We've covered a lot of ground about the USS Frank E Evans, about the crash, the accident, the incident, whatever you want to call it, the lost 74, and the efforts to get them on the Vietnam Wall. Is there anything else I should have asked you about but haven't?
Well, I think there's one thing that maybe I could add to this, and that's for everybody to remember that our service people actually put their life on the line every day, no matter where they are or what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And in this instance, that 74 did the same thing. They never went there thinking, oh, I'm going to get killed and I'm not coming home. Nobody thinks that way. But
nobody hopes to.
Yeah, so it shouldn't make any difference, where you are or what you're doing if you lose your life for this country as a serviceman,
Especially since you had just been in Vietnam weeks beforehand.
Yeah, and the Department of Defense own criteria allows for that. It says if you're going to or from a defined combat zone, and that was put in there to cover all these people that were flying, sorties from Japan, dropping bombs and going back. Their planes crashed or whatever. It was there for a purpose put in there, but for some reason they don't want to apply that to this, because I think it's the numbers. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do with the numbers?
Well, Steve, thank you so much for joining us on Coming On Well. What a tragedy. Not only for the lost 74, but the fact that they're not being remembered for their service in Vietnam the way they should be. Right. Steve, I'll leave you with the last word. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I think once again, our appreciation to, coming home for allowing us, the time to do this, and to my fellow veterans and all that, I would just say, welcome home.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us on Coming Home Well.
Thanks for joining us this week on Coming Home Well with Dr. Tyler Piron. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and a review. Thanks again. And until all are home and all are well, this is Coming Home Well.